Penny, pretend like I've never heard your story before.
You have to speak up a little bit.
I said, pretend like I've never heard your story before. I can't even tell.
Once or twice, I
oh,
think.
Maybe.
My name is Hannah Liebman. I was born on November the 28th, 1924.
And where were you born?
In a city called Karlsruhe, the southwest of Germany. You know, when I was born, Germany still had a democracy. And by 1933, it had become a dictatorship. And life became ever more difficult. There was the boycott of 1933, where all Jewish businesses were boycotted with decals on the windows and signs in the street, don't buy from Jews, they are our enemy, they are to blame for everything that went wrong. And life became more difficult. And as time went on, it became ever more so.
What was your family like?
My family?
Yes.
Well, I had an older brother, 3 years older. My father died when I was 3 months old, so I had a mother. And my mother had a large family, sisters, a number of sisters for that matter. They were a big family. An uncle on my mother's side, 2 uncles on my father's side. So actually it was a big family, and they all stuck together like glue.
Was your family religious?
Not really. My grandparents were, on both sides. None of their children were religious. Yes, high holidays were observed Friday night, candles were on the table, but really religious in the, strictest form, no.
And what did your mom do for a living? What did your mother do for a living?
Oh, we had a photo studio, which my father and my father's brother started way back in 1901. And my mother continued the business even after my father passed away.
So you went to a public school, right? Jews
Yes.
and non-Jews?
I went to public school till, I think, 1936, at which time Jewish children could not go to public schools anymore, and a Jewish school in our city was established. Now, that was a secular school, obviously. Other cities, bigger cities, had Jewish schools, also secular yeshivas. Like the city of Frankfurt had an excellent Jewish school. So, yeah.
Do you remember experiencing any anti-Semitism in Germany?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We were called names. Some of the kids were beaten up. We couldn't have any Gentile friends. Neither did they dare associate with us, because the parents would have been, maybe the father would have lost his job or whatever. Excuse me. And life became very restricted.
How did life change once the Nazis come into power?
Life before the Nazis, other than the economic situation in Germany, which was deplorable because after the First World War, there was not enough food, there was great unemployment. And of course, a horrible inflation. Then came the Depression, like you had here in this country. It was a worldwide depression, and it hit everybody very much. Hitler tried to blame the Jewish people for the depression. They are to blame for it. I don't know how we were supposed to be blamed for the Depression in America. And you all know the saying here in this country, brother, can you spare a dime? And that was actually something that happened in Germany as well. So people went begging, and they would, let's say, go into the backyard of an apartment house and play an instrument or sing or do something in the hopes that one or the other housewife would throw down a couple of pennies. I mean, I remember that very well.
What do you remember about Kristallnacht?
Of what?
Kristallnacht.
Oh, Kristallnacht. I went to school like every morning, Jewish school, obviously. I passed on my way a Orthodox synagogue, but the synagogue was built behind another house. It was in the huge courtyard. It was a very pretty synagogue. And there were fire engines standing there, and I couldn't figure out. I didn't see any fire. Couldn't figure out where they were there. And went on to school. And I must say I was kind of a noisy kid. And came in the classroom, and we could go in our classrooms without being lined up. And I came in and said, guess what? I saw the fire engines there. And my friends looked at me and said, don't you know what's going on? I said, what's going on? I don't know. So they were sitting there actually in tears because their fathers had already been arrested and taken away. 300,000 Jewish men were arrested and taken to concentration camps. 100 of them were beaten to death, heart attacks, suicide, you name it. It was a very, very, you can't even describe the feeling. We were in school for 2 hours and then we were dismissed because the male teachers had been arrested and there were only a few women teachers. And we were sent home, I think, after 2 hours. And on the way home, and we lived on the main street of town, I saw a big group of people in the street. And I first looked to my left, and next to the building where we were in was a Jewish store dealing in Oriental carpeting. The windows had been smashed. Ink had been thrown over the carpeting, making them worthless. And a few steps further, I saw my mother sweeping up the sidewalk with people standing around her and thinking that's very funny because our showcases had been smashed. And you can't leave the glass on the sidewalk, right? So I offered my mother to do it, and she said, no, you go up, because she was afraid that something would happen to me. It was the first time I saw my mother sweeping a sidewalk, that's for sure. And people just laughed, they thought it was funny. Like they laughed when we were deported and my grandmother couldn't get up on the truck.
So what happens after Kristallnacht? When are you deported?
All Jewish businesses had to be closed by December 31st, 1938. No more livelihood. Our synagogue had been destroyed to the point where it had to be torn down. And that money was then used to feed the members of the congregation who couldn't feed themselves anymore because they couldn't work. So, what was your question?
Deportation. Deportation.
Deportation. Well, we were deported on October 22nd, 1940. Police and party members came and arrested us and told us we had maybe an hour's time, some people say 2, and just pack what we could carry, and we were taken away. We had to sign papers that everything that was in the apartment now belonged to the German government. Everything. Whatever money we had, whether in the bank or not, was their property now. Now, we were 6 people, meaning my mother, my paternal grandmother of 91 and a half, and I, and 3 of my mother's sisters. We had all moved together because we had a big apartment, and one rent is cheaper than 2. And so we were 6 people, 6 women. And we had to leave. It was very upsetting, to say the least.
What did you take with you? What did you take with you?
What we took? My mother was a genius at packing. And she realized, well, this was October, you needed warm stuff. But maybe you also take some summer stuff with you. And maybe you take more than 1 pair of shoes on your feet. So whatever people could manage to put together. My mother kept her head together. Let's put it that way. And I packed for my grandmother, and my grandmother said to me, down in my armoire is a box. Yeah? What's in there? The stuff when you bury Jews, they're buried in, I missed the word just now.
Shroud? A shroud?
Shrouds. They're my shrouds. I want to take them. And I said, no, we are not taking them because we need to take clothing. We don't have enough room for that. So, okay, don't take them. I got as much together as I could for her. After all, she's 91 and a half years old. And I think we took a blanket for her, but I'm not sure anymore. I know we had 1 blanket along. And in the last minute before she started walking down the stairs, my mother had a little fur cape. She put it over her shoulder so she should be warm. Okay, that was not my mother's mother, my father's mother. So we were taken downstairs. The apartment was sealed. And we had to, as I mentioned, to sign papers that everything now belonged to the German Reich. And downstairs in front of the house was a truck, an open police truck. It had benches to sit on, and the side was down, and it had little steps, rises. And my grandmother couldn't get up. After all, she's very old. And I tried to help her, and I couldn't do it. And people were standing there and laughing at this old woman that she was struggling to get up on the police car. I think it's one of the saddest things that people can find this funny. So eventually a policeman gave her a push. And we were taken to the railroad station, and everybody, Jewish person from town, was assembled there. And after some time, we were taken up on the railroad station, and we couldn't figure out why the train was on platform 1. Platform 1 went south, west, south. We anticipated southeast, Dachau. Well, that was not so. We were taken to France. And I have to interject something here. The morning we were deported, my mother sent me to a Christian friend and told me to take some items to her, which she sort of loved, and always told my mother, if you leave, I would like to have that. So my mother took that stuff, put it in a bag, and said, go take it to them. And I did. And when I was there, the lady told me, you know what? You're going to the south of France. And when her husband was a lawyer, very anti-Nazi. When I told my mother, she said, Don't be ridiculous. Well, you talk about the south of France, it's Nice or Cannes or Saint-Tropez or any of these wonderful places. My mother, don't be ridiculous. Well, we went to the southwest of France, but not to the Riviera. We were taken to a concentration camp called Gurs, G-U-R-S, and we were incarcerated.
What happened with your grandmother on the train?
My grandmother lost her mind on the train. Look, she was a very old lady. Sitting on a hard seat for 3 days is very difficult. No food, no water, nothing. We were allowed, by the way, to take some food if we had it in the house. But who has food for 6 people when everything is rationed? And she was taken off the train first because of the condition she was in. She was totally confused. Before we came to Oloron-Saint-Marie, which was the station, we were taken off. The evening before, she told me, just to tell you how confused she was, she said to me, I want to go to bed. Please help me to undress and take my shoes off. In a train, right? So, okay. The kids would say she lost it. And there was a doctor on the train which my mother was able to get. He was in the next car. And he gave her some sleeping pills. And the expectation was really that she would not wake up. This did not happen. She did wake up. And when we were in Oloron-Saint-Marie, she was taken off the train, taken away, and we had no idea where she was taken to. And for several weeks after we were in the camp, we didn't know where she was. Was she somewhere in an institution? Was she? We had no idea. So one day someone came to my mother and said, your mother-in-law is over there in that other block. And that block had a barracks for elderly people. And they actually had something like a cot to sleep on, because we had none of that. We slept on the floor, okay? So, and there were women equally incarcerated who were willing to take care of the elderly people who needed help. And so my mother felt she's better off there than if we take her into our barracks where she would be on the floor, try to get on the floor at 91 and get up, and that was a terrible situation. And so we left her there. She eventually got pneumonia, and in her death certificate, which we asked for a few years ago, it said that she died of pneumonia and dementia, but nobody said that she starved to death. It's not in the, okay. She was buried in a religious way, if you wish, like all the people, all the Jewish people in the camp cemetery. She was in a casket. My mother tried her best to find something that would be like a shroud, and she was successful. And so she was buried in the Jewish faith.
Were other people, was everyone buried? Was everyone buried in the cemetery there?
1,000 people. There were 1,000 people in that cemetery of the transport of our transport. So everybody was buried, yes. And it was a horrible thing. And I'll tell you why. That was my very first funeral I ever attended. And In Gurs, it rained a lot because we are so close to the Atlantic. It rained a lot, and the ground was mud. And they did what you would call, missing the word. They prepared a regular thing to put the casket in, right? And the casket was put in, and it went down, and it came back up, because there was so much water in that grave that it came back up. It was a horrible, horrible sight, to say the least. I shall never, never forget this casket coming back up and back down. The funerals, there was a rabbi. It was done the best you could do under the circumstances.
That's amazing. There was a rabbi and then...
Oh, we had a couple of rabbis in the camp. Thank you. Thank you very much.
What were the conditions like in the camp for
The
you?
conditions in the camp.
Yeah.
The camp was divided into blocks from A to M. The lower ones were the men, up to, I don't know, E, something like E or F, and then G was a men's block. Then the women, okay, separation. Visiting each other was extremely difficult, that the husband and wife could see each other exactly at the time where they needed each other's moral support the most. And what happened is that sometimes they went to the cemetery when there was a funeral. They would meet at the cemetery so they could talk to one another. That was in the beginning. Later on, there was an arrangement made where they could visit for an hour, where the husband could come to the wife or the wife to the husband. But it was not a daily thing either. So, life in the camp, we slept on the floor, we are given some straw, eventually some cotton sacks to put the straw in. And food was more than scarce. And some people died of starvation. We got bread about that much every day that had to last for 24 hours. And there was always, when the bread was cut, everybody watched that it would be exactly the same, that one doesn't get a millimeter more than the next one. The old people had a very hard time, as I mentioned. If you are very old, you can barely get down on the floor, let alone get up. And I can speak for that, let me tell you. I experience it all the time. What did people do? Nothing. There was nothing to do, which was worse than anything else, because you're not occupied with anything, right? The average person. So life was very, very difficult. The morning we got something that looked like coffee. Lunchtime was a watery vegetable soup. Maybe it had a little morsel of meat in there. Same thing in the evening, or sometimes only tea. And that was it.
What about the mud? So there was a lot of mud.
The what?
A lot of mud.
Oh, the ground, because it rains all the time. The area was totally deforested, and we lived in mud. We also lived with rats and mice and fleas and lice. We had a zoo around ourselves. One morning, I woke up and I wanted to take my shoe to put it on. And what I found in my shoe was a family of mice, tiny little ones. So now what are you going to do with these little mice? You sure not let them live. So I went outside the barracks, and around each barrack was like a moat. So when the water came down from the barracks, it would drip in there. And I just drowned them, period. It was not nice, but you wouldn't let them live either. So life was very hard, very, very hard.
And you've said people would get stuck in the mud, right?
Oh yes, we got stuck in the mud. We would have mud up to here, way above your ankles. We had a woman who went to the latrine during the night, and she got stuck in the mud. She could not extricate herself. She pitched forward. That was it.
What kind of friendships or relationships did you make in the camp? Friendships or relationships in the camp?
The relationship between people, some were good, some were not. Okay, like everywhere in the world, some people get along and some don't. And since you lived now in a barracks with 60 people and 30 inches of space per person about, it was very difficult, very difficult. Some people were very good about it all, if you could say that. Others were not. And, like everywhere in the world, some people get along and some don't. So this was very difficult.
When did you meet Max? Did you meet him in the
Oh,
camp?
I met Max. We had in each block what was called an office. Not like here. Okay. And his mother, since she spoke a fluent French, worked in this office. We had to make daily lists of who died, who this, who that. And he could circulate in the camp because they had established a cultural life. So that we had string quartets, we had singers, we had a dancer, we had a pianist, we had a singer. And he belonged to the string quartet. The instruments came, I believe, from the YMCA, that they brought him in. And because of this, he could circulate in the camp at any time. So he could come and see his mother every day. And I was in that office. I didn't speak French, but I could do some of the work that had to be done. And that's how I met him. And we are now married 75 years. So add the 4 years before we were married, 79 years. That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah. It's very good. Can you talk about the social agencies in the camp?
Oh, yeah. Well, the social agencies, there was the OSE, which is a Jewish child welfare organization. There were Catholic and Protestant agencies in the Y. And then the Swiss Red Cross Children's Division. Okay. And the Red Cross had a barracks, and they would give out some food to the most malnourished, undernourished young people and children, and also to some adults whenever they had, So I was one of the lucky ones to go there every morning for some time to get a bowl of milk, and they put in some stuff to fortify the milk, like the Ovaltine, if you know Ovaltine. And maybe there was a little bit of cheese or an olive or two, something, whatever they could find or were sent. And Max also went there. So every morning he would pick me up because he was on the lower end of the camp and I was at the other end. So he would pick me up every morning. We would go up there. By the way, you were not allowed to take anything out of these barracks, not even an olive. You had to eat it there, which made sense. So I would love to have taken an olive out of there. My aunt loved them. So anyway, came the time where a social worker came around to my mother and asked her whether she would let me go to a place called Les Chambons in a Swiss Red Cross home. And we really didn't know anything about the village, other than they were willing to take us. And she asked me, and I said, of course. And I had a little bit of a mixed feeling, but I did go. And lucky me, we were 70 young people, teenagers, who together went to Les Chambons. By now, Les Chambons is, I think, quite well known. It wasn't always like that. Les Chambons was unique, absolutely unique, thanks to the two pastors and the population who was willing to go along with that and do what needed to be done. And that was get people out of the camps or wherever they came from and protect them, hide them, take care of them. And we 7 were placed in a home, as I mentioned, by the Swiss Red Cross Children's Division. And yeah, the food was better. Was it sufficient for 17-year-old boys? They always said they were hungry. And now we had food. And the people in the village, they're unique. Many, many years later, my husband and I went back to the village. And we mentioned to one of the people in the village what they did. And the answer was, we didn't do anything. It was so self-understood that you help someone who needs to be helped. We do not know an exact number of people who were in the village, but it probably is around 3,000, which is a lot of people to hide, a lot of people to feed, a lot of people to take care of and give them false IDs. But it was done, and in August, beginning of August, I got a letter from a relative that I should, if at all possible, come to the camp to visit my mother because she was very ill. So what do? You take your little bit of money. I had worked in a preventorium. You know what that is? It's a strange word in America. A preventorium is a place where there were children who were in danger of getting TB. Prevent, right? And I worked there for a few months, so I had a little money in my pocket. And of course, I went. And I came to the camp, and I was told it's under lockdown. So my mother was notified that I was there, and I saw my mother at a great distance in a shouted conversation. And the next day, I was told that people will be deported. And the 6th of August. So the organizations came to my rescue, if you wish, and arranged that I could be at the freight yards to see my mother in Oloron-Saint-Marie. And I went there, and I slept during the night between two houses on a little wall. I stayed all night out in the open, and the next morning around maybe 6 o'clock or so, I went over to the freight yards, and they let me in. And now there is a freight train, a long, long freight train. Where is your mother? So I was leaning up against a shed, a warehouse sort of thing. And one of the French policemen asked me, "What are you doing here?" And I said, well, I explained it to him. He said, I said, "I don't know in which car my mother is." He said, "I will find her for you." And he did. He asked me for her name. And he did, and he came back and said, "Your mother is in such and such a car." And then he said, "What goes on here breaks my heart." So I had about an hour with my mother. At one time I actually was in the car, which was a silly thing to do. But you do want to give your mother a kiss. And then, of course, the cars were locked. You're speaking cattle cars. I think there were 60 or more people per car, and a pail in the corner. And a last kiss, a last embrace. Doors were locked. Train went out. And the last thing I saw of my mother was a little white handkerchief fluttering out between the slats of the car. I went back to Le Chambon. I told them what happened. And Pastor Trocmeo was really the leading person in the village, he and Pastor Treis. He was upset that I didn't come immediately to him and told him what went on. I was exhausted in every way. By the way, on the way back from Oloron-Saint-Marie, Max had been freed from the camp and was in a little place outside of Lyon, in a Jewish Boy Scout camp. In France, the Boy Scouts are separated by religion or whatever. I don't know really what. And I went to see him, and I told him what happened. His mother was still in the camp. And I told him, "If you're not safe here, come where I am." And sure enough, he was not safe there. He was not safe because all of the very religious young people got false IDs, except two who weren't religious, my husband and a friend. So the two of them came to Le Chambon, they managed. My husband spoke a fluent French, so did his friends. So the language was not a problem. And he came, and now he didn't know, of course, where I am or what to do. He was in the village, the two of them. So they've decided they better go into the woods, you know. And funny enough, they walked in the right direction, and they found a tennis court, and they thought that was a good place to stay. And they did. Now, we, from La Gaspé, from the home, we were not in the home at night. We were in another house. Right? If the police looks up there for us, we are not there. And as I walked back with a friend, someone was whistling behind me. And I paid no mind. Again he whistled. Again. I still don't pay any mind. And my friend said, "Turn around." I said, "Leave me alone. These are the kids from the Collège Sévenol who are making their morning thing." And she literally turned me around. And who was standing there? Max. By evening, Max was in hiding. This is how well they worked, right? And got things organized. He was in hiding the first night in a nice home, and then he was transferred to a farm, and he lived in the hayloft for several weeks, and the farmer had cut a hole in the hayloft, which was right above the stable, to use that as a toilet. You have to be inventive, right? So the only time he could come down, I believe, was in the evening for a meal. Everything else went into the hayloft. And then they arranged for him false papers and to leave together with some others to go to Switzerland. And they did. And he was stopped by the Swiss mountain police, who told him they will keep him overnight in a mountain hut, which is for people who climb and stuff like that. And that the next morning, back he go. So in the morning, all of the people they had caught that day, about 40 people, they are assembled and told, you cannot go this way. You have to go back to France. You understand? You have to go back to France. You can't go. Okay. My husband and one other guy disobeyed military orders. They went that way. And they made it. They made it. They got into Switzerland, and the rest is history. I myself eventually got false papers and went to Switzerland as well, except that my family in Switzerland had actually gotten a visa for me to enter the country. In other words, I would have been legal. You couldn't get that visa to enter a country unless you have an exit visa. Exit visas were not to be had no matter what. There was a law, no more exit visas. So the visa sitting at the consulate didn't help me one bit. So I had to go like everybody else, except I went by myself. And I made it. I went, what is it, Chambon, Saint-Étienne, Lyon, Annemasse, Annecy. And in Annecy, there was a problem, and I was in the car with two people who were talking about things they shouldn't have been talking about. And it was night by the time we got there. And the gentleman asked me, where do you go? I said, we'll find something. I was supposed to go to a Catholic boarding school to stay overnight. And he said, okay, I will accompany you. I couldn't get rid of him. He said, I told him, I will find something, don't worry, I can, No, he wasn't let me do that. The boarding school did not answer the bell. It did not open the door. It didn't do anything. So he said, what are you going to do now? I said, well, I have to go someplace to sleep. So he took me to a hotel, 5th rate. Didn't matter. They had a room. I had a bed to sleep on. I paid my stay the next morning, and I left. Went back to that boarding school, and I told them, and they said, okay, we give you a breakfast. And I had a breakfast there, and they told me how to proceed, and I did. And eventually met the guide that was supposed to take me over the border, which was arranged by my family in Switzerland. And I was there. There was a family with 2 children and a single young man. And the guide took us across the border. Now, what was the border there? a little stream made the border between France and Switzerland. So he carried us across the water so we wouldn't be wet, told us which direction we have to walk in order to get the streetcar to go into Geneva, gave us some Swiss money so we could pay our fare, and we made it. The first time around, by the way, while we were walking, we walked in a circle, came out where we started from. Next time we knew. We got into Geneva, got off at a station where we were supposed to get off. There was someone waiting for us and took us to a place to stay. And I asked her, it was 11 o'clock at night. You don't make telephone calls in Europe 11 o'clock at night. And I told her to please call my family, my aunt. Oh, it's 11 o'clock, you can't call. Call her, she is an insomniac, she is not asleep, please call. She did. And my aunt came the next morning to Geneva to pick me up. And I was in Switzerland from 1942, 43, till 48. I lived first with my family, and then I took a job in Geneva as a maid and got married in Geneva in April of 1945, right? And we came here to this country in 1948. My husband was in Switzerland, always in a refugee home. And after we were married, I asked, because I had immigrant status, not refugee status, asked for permissions that I can stay with him in the refugee home. And they granted that, and we were in 3 different places. And he was in the office, he worked in the office in each of the homes. And we came here in 48, and our daughter was just 2 years old the first day we were here.
When did you get stopped by the officer when he looked at your fake passport and he asked if you were...
Oh, you speak of the incident when we were in the Swiss home and the police came. And I know what you're referring to. When I was walking towards that farm or whatever it was, I first went to a priest. The arrangement was I was going to the priest. And I passed, you're right, I passed a customs house. It's wartime. What traffic between France and Switzerland? Ridiculous. I was called back. And your papers, so I showed him my false papers, everything. I still have them. And no, you have a copy. The real ones is in Washington. Customs officer talked to me, and then he hit me and said, "Are you Jewish?" Just out of the blue. I said, "Me? I have nothing to do with that dirty race," which was Hitler propaganda. Then he said, "Okay, you can go." How quickly I found that answer, I have no idea. It just came out of me. So I was lucky. I was very lucky.
What happened to your 3 aunts? What happened to your 3 aunts that were in Gurs with you?
What happened to what?
Your 3 aunts
Oh, my aunts. The oldest one passed away,
in the camp?
and the other 2 could leave Gurs in the fall of 1941. They went to Marseille, and from there to Cuba. They had a visa, got visas for Cuba. So my 2 aunts, my 2 surviving aunts, went to Cuba. They were down there till spring of 48, I think May or something like that. Then they came here. but at least they were safe.
Why did they get to stay and your mom was deported?
They were lucky that someone had enough money to take care of them. My mother didn't have anyone to take care of her. It was also a matter of money. So certainly my 20-year-old brother couldn't take care of that because you needed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And just was not in the stores.
What did your mother say to you? What did your mother say to you in that hour that you had?
When we were at the train, she gave me good motherly advice, which I don't remember, like all mothers do. You will find out. And she felt that I was safe where I am. And that, I think, gave her great comfort, thinking that I was safe.
Were you scared to be like so near?
Was
to
I
Germany?
scared? Don't be scared, otherwise you make mistakes.
How do you feel about Germany and Germans today?
Well, I personally would never set foot into Germany again. Haven't and will not. Even so, they invited people to come, blah, blah, blah. Not me. They tried their best, let's put it, at least the government. But you have anti-Semitic incidents in Germany. You have anti-Semitic incidents even here in this country. It is very, very sad.
Did you ever
You
go back?
cannot erase an ideology. You can't. It will always live on. We have here the KKK. It lives on, right? We had incidents here. We should know better, but it happens.
When did you first start talking about the Holocaust?
The first time, I believe, probably for the museum in Washington, said I gave an interview there. I really don't know if I don't think I spoke about it.
You did Shoah testimony, right? You did the Shoah testimony, right?
The museum in Washington?
No, the one in California, the Shoah. You did testimony
For the
that,
show
right?
of, yeah, for Pierre Sauvage?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's, by the way, about to come.
Oh yeah.
I spoke to him last week.
What made you come to like this center and like start talking to students?
By the way, I would like to mention that all of the young people, the 7 of us, we all survived thanks to the village. We all came. Now 2 of them stayed in France. The others all came here. That's a pretty good record, isn't it?
All 7 were in the camp?
We were 7 in the camp, 7 in Le Chambon, 7 survived.
And you kept in touch with them?
2 stayed in France, and all the others came here.
Did you see them regularly?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Do you still talk to any of them or their family now? Do you still talk to any of them or their family today?
Some of them had family, some of them did not.
What do you think that people can do today to stop anti-Semitism and hatred?
Well, you know, some kids in one of the schools, Jewish school, asked me, what can we do to stop anti-Semitism? And for a moment, I really didn't know what to say. It's quite a loaded question. Then I said, you know what? Said we live at the highest moral and ethical standards, which some people are not. Let's talk about Mr. Epstein, right? You think that helps the Jewish community? I don't think so.
what would you want people to remember about your experience, your specific experience?
Remember about what?
About your experience. So for students that maybe watch this video, what do you want the takeaway?
What I would people to remember or know is the goodness of the people in Le Chambon who made it possible for so many people to survive, putting their own lives at risk. Because if we had been found when, let's say, we were with the farmer would have most likely been arrested and might not have survived. So these people take a great chance in helping us. And I think people have to learn how to help each other.
You know what story you didn't mention? When the Nazis came and you guys were hiding were you hiding in the attic of the farmhouse when they came and the wine?
Oh yeah. When the other girl and I were up we had a room actually, but it was upstairs. And the police came, and eventually they asked the farmer, "Are you hiding any Jews?" And the farmer said, "Hiding any Jews? I don't even know what they look like. I'm not hiding anybody. I don't know what they look like." He offered him a glass of wine, since it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, which is fine in France. And the gendarme said, "No, I'll be on my way, goodbye." Because we could hear it all.
Anything else you want to mention?
No.
Yeah. Such a good story. Thank you.
You're welcome. We do what we can, right?
Yeah.